Welcome, welcome. So good to see you guys. This is our normal Wednesday night crowd, so it's great. I'm just kidding. Welcome. So glad you're here. Those of you that are visiting and from other brother and sister churches, thank you so much for coming. We're so thankful you're here. I'm Michael Wilbanks. I'm one of the pastors here, and I want to just first of all welcome you, but also let you know that if you need a restroom, there are some out in the lobby, and then there are some right down that aisle right there, that hallway, and just look to the left and walk, make a left, and you'll see the other bathroom. So glad you're here, and I just want to open us with a word of prayer, and then I'm going to turn it over to Brian. I know you guys are somewhat familiar with his testimony, so I won't go into all that, but we're just so thankful that God is using him in a mighty way. Okay, so let me pray for us. Father, thank you for your goodness, even in hard times. And rough trials, you use it for your good and for your glory. Your word tells us that you're the God of all comfort, and that in those times where we need comfort, we can use that comfort to minister to others. And I thank you for Brian and what you're doing in and through him. And so we pray tonight, Lord, you be with him as he shares, give him the strength and the courage and the boldness to say what needs to be said, and give us ears to hear that we might hear. We pray this in the name of Christ. Amen.
Well, thanks for that introduction. If adults and youth, if you were young people, if you were at the school today, you're going to get a bit of a repeat, but not completely. Tonight's presentation is mostly to parents. As a parent and in the situation we found ourselves in, information and understanding would have made a tremendous difference in our situation, we believe. So again, my name is Brian Montgomery. We live just outside of Starkville, Mississippi. I've already been given a really hard time over my vest, so I told him I was going to turn it inside out, but I see a few state fans out there, so we're in pretty decent company. So I guess what I want to start with is kind of tell you guys just a little bit about who we are as a family. I'm in the ag business. I farm a little bit, sell crop insurance, and met my wife in high school. Both of us came from middle to lower class families. Once we were married, dated for a while. Once we were married, really saw God pulling us into a relationship with him more deeply. And she came up in a church. I was raised in and out of church. Both of us, though, were saved at a relatively early age. And so we knew we wanted to bring our kids up in a real close-knit family. Her parents had been divorced. She lived with her grandparents. My parents were not divorced, but it wasn't ideal. But they were, my personal parents were awesome people. We just didn't attend church all that often. We did some, but grew up in Greenville, Mississippi. It's where we grew up, both my wife and I both. Fast forward a little bit. God just really blessed us. I mean, if I use the word, sometimes I felt favored. Every dream that we dreamed, God gave it to us. From family to business to things to relationships to friends. Everything that we may have been missing in family, or we didn't have a close-knit family in certain places, God gave us friends. He gave us relationships. And he gave us a perfect 4 kids. 2 boys, 2 girls. There was Caroline, my oldest daughter, Walker. At the time we lost Walker, he was 16. Bennett, his younger brother, and then Sarah. So we had 2 boys and 2 girls, boys in the middle. We spent, my personal passion, you'll see with these pictures that we're playing, they'll come back up here in a second. It's just, you'll see a lot of us, on our farm working, a lot of time of us spending together in the outdoors. My personal passion is archery and bow hunting and big game and just the outdoors, fishing, also farming. And Walker specifically was very drawn to that. We spent so much time together. You'll see pictures of him turkey hunting. You see pictures of him on the football field. And every weekend we just spent time together as a family. I mean, that's what we did. And I'm giving you this perspective because I think we're going to move into the part of this conversation in a few minutes where it doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense to me then, and it doesn't make sense to me now, except for that I know God has a plan. God is sovereign. There's not anything that happens that's out from under his control. It's not anything that happens in our lives that he doesn't allow in some capacity. We can debate how that functions and all those things, but I'm not interested in that. What I do know this is that I'm standing here today by the grace of God and because of his purposes in my life. And so that being said, we're going to move into some different parts of this conversation, like I said, in a little bit, that just really doesn't make sense apart from that. And so, but before we do that, the kids, if you were there this morning, you saw this. This is kind of to get us started on a little bit lighter note, but tell you a little bit about my son Bennett. So Bennett, Walker's younger brother, he was always my scaredy cat. He was scared of bugs. I told the kids this morning, we'd go fishing. He wouldn't bait his own hook. He wouldn't take his own fish off the hook. It was always a fight because I'm the dad that's out there going, doing, wanting to go, and Bennett was like, I'm scared of that. And so there around the time Walker died, maybe a little before Walker died, he started talking about he wanted to be an Army Ranger. He wanted to jump out of airplanes. I'm like, dude, you're scared of heights. How are you going to jump out? How are you going to jump out of airplanes? But he kind of kept on it, and so I finally called his bluff. So we figured out, I said, okay, after Walker had passed away, I said, you know what, let's go do something fun. And so I started calling around. Nobody would let him jump out of an airplane. You got to be 18 years old to go skydiving. And of course, I'm not scared of heights, but I wasn't particularly looking forward to skydiving. I mean, it was not on my bucket list, so to speak. But he said, I want to skydive. So I said, okay. So I started calling, couldn't find anybody. Finally found a guy in Delta, Colorado that would let a 13-year-old skydive. So at the time I said, well, why would you let somebody 13 skydive and nobody else will? He said, well, the truth of it is if we have an accident, I'm not going to be around for anybody to sue. He said, the reason nobody will let you skydive is because the insurance won't write the liability coverage for somebody under 18 to jump. He said, but for me, I don't have a family and I don't really have much, so if we have an accident, we're both not going to be here, so it really doesn't matter. This guy had jumped a lot. But I'm going to show you that video. It's kind of funny, and then we'll kind of get started. This first. Why we live. Go to the next video, but the next one. So Bennett, when he jumped, he looked like he'd been there before, right? I mean, like he kind of enjoyed it, like he was there. Okay, this is me jumping. When it got hung up, there we go. I told the kids earlier, you know, if you just keep watching. The older you get, the looser your skin gets. So I will say, there's no prettier place. Delta, Colorado. If you're ever going to go skydiving, that's the guy to go with. He was very professional, felt very safe. It was awesome. But if I asked you how often is there a skydiving accident when somebody dies, most people would say the odds are pretty low. The odds are about 1 in 500,000 is about how often somebody jumps out of an airplane. One out of every 500,000 jumps, there's a fatality. So what my question was, and why this is relevant to our story, is what are the odds of our family being the one out of all the kids that were a victim of sextortion in 2022, December the 1st of 22 is when we lost Walker. What are the odds of all the attacks in the world? What's the odds of us being that one? And the odds are very low. But the reality is that, I'm going to go back to this, the reality is that God had a plan for our family. And I don't understand how he uses these tough things, these hard things, these things that are just embedded in sin to change other people and to affect other people. I don't understand. I know he uses it. I know he is. I know that's why we're here. So with that all being said, the skydiving is a good transition into talk about who was Walker. Like, when we think about them odds, who was he? So we'll go with, like, this first picture is a picture of Walker on a baseball field. He was little. So just to give you some context of who he was, he came up, Walker was, neither one of my boys were never good in baseball. Both of them loved football, but neither one of them were very good at baseball. But Walker, he came up there, and this was still coach pitch, I believe. I know it was. He comes up there, and I was coaching first base, and there was another coach, of course, getting him up there to the plate, and they said, all right, Walker, we really need a hit right here. We need a good hit. We're down by 1 run, and we've got somebody on base. It's the end of the game. We need a hit. So Walker gets up there. I think they threw the ball. He missed it. Threw it again, fouled it off maybe. Threw it again, and he hits it, and it goes to the fence. And he runs all the way to first base. Of course, all his buddies were on his team. All the people that he loved being around, all his little friends, and they had heard this whole conversation around at the plate. And so Walker gets because what he said right before he hit the ball is he told the coach, he said, I'm going to hit that ball so hard, they're going to call me the Hammer. Well, as soon as he gets to first base, he's cheering. They're going to call me the Hammer. I told you I was going to hit it. So from that point forward, his nickname was Hammer from there on. That was, even to this day, when I see his friends, they said, I sure miss Hammer. It's not Walker. Of course, we always called him Walker. We didn't want to give him too much of the big head. But he was just this fun-loving kid, and had a great friend group, had great community. This next picture, we looked like Walker's. We had a big old disc down at our farm, clearing some new ground, had a bulldozer out there. He loved equipment. He loved the farm. He loved the outdoors. If you go to the next one, you'll see, him at a football game. He just loved it. He loved the athletics. He loved the competition. He loved all of that. And so the odds of this, when I tell people about Walker, what I always say is that, if there was a line of kids, of people, of individuals, their personalities and how they were wired, Walker would be at the end of that line of a kid that was prone to suicide. And that's the truth. That's a true statement. And that's not changed, even though what happened, that still doesn't change, because the reality is that Walker was attacked. And I'm going to go through that in a minute of how that happened. But at the end of the day, why do we lock our doors? Why do we send our kids to good schools where we feel like they're safe? Why do we live in certain neighborhoods? Why do we live in certain towns? This is a beautiful little town. I mean, I could tell at the school today, the kids were just all well behaved and were listening to everything I said. You guys did a great job. You should be very proud of your community. Why do we do that? Why don't we try to associate ourselves with what we consider safe? Because we know there's a world out there that's not safe in some capacity. I tell people I wouldn't carry my 15-year-old down to Skid Row and just drop him off and say, good luck. Why? Because there's dangerous things down there. Why would I not take a 2-year-old and just drop him off, let him go play in a 4-lane highway? Because it's dangerous, right? They don't understand the dangers around them. So similar to that, that's what I want to communicate here tonight. I think the issue with this telephone and all the things that are on it and all the things that they have access to, there's access to our kids that I did not understand. I didn't appreciate the dangers. So what I want to accomplish here for the parents specifically, grandparents specifically, is for you guys to leave here with a good impression of where we are today and kind of what we can do to mitigate some of these dangers. So what happened to Walker? So you can keep the pictures just going, and I'll just talk. The night of November the 30th was a very normal night for our family. I went hunting. Bennett went hunting. Walker had something to do with the football team. He had just started driving. Literally, he had his driver's license about 3 weeks. I remember we got home, ate supper around the table, which is something we do just about every night, still do just about every night, is we try to eat together as a family. We try not to make, where everybody's going different directions. We try to accumulate back at every night so we can have conversations, talk about the day, watch Andy Griffith. I mean, just trying to continue to make sure that we're building community within our family and that we're providing that structure to our kids, something my wife and I really had but didn't always have. And so, that being said, I remember at the kitchen table, Walker talking about his truck. And he just got in his truck, and I just got him an F-150. And boys, you can relate to this if you're driving yet. He wanted to jack it up and put big tires on it. Wanted to make it loud. I was like, man, you're not going to do that. He's like, yeah, I want to do that. I was like, well, I hope you got some money. I just bought a truck, man. I'm going to get it. I'm going to keep working. So I remember picking at him about that. I remember it was just normal. Nothing special whatsoever. I remember the meal we ate, exactly. We ate chicken thighs. He loved it. And I remember we got done with supper, cleaned up. They went to their room, and we sat around on the couch, watched TV. And there about 10 o'clock, Courtney, my wife, went and put them to bed, prayed with them. My oldest daughter was at school, and they were in their rooms, and she prayed with them. We went to bed just like we had done every night before. What we didn't know is that we were sending Walker to bed with a phone that gave access to him to some really, really dangerous people. We didn't know that. And so that night, Walker went to bed, and we know this because of the FBI evidence they pulled off his telephone. He was communicating with friends from school, just guys he goes to school with. They were actually exchanging Bible verses that night. He had a really good friend group. And from that point, he was on Instagram for a while, and then all of a sudden about midnight, somebody sends him a message through Instagram. And the message was just hey, what's up? Walker looked at it. It was someone that looked like a teenage girl, about his age, pretty, attractive. So he said, not much. Then this conversation seems very innocent. It's just going back and forth. She's asking about his football season. She sees on his Instagram page that he hunts. She's just asking just normal, everyday questions, building credibility. She even makes the comment that she was friends with somebody else that he was friends with, because that's what these people do. They do things to build credibility. So they had gone, not physical friends, like our generation, we think of a friend as somebody that I can look at and talk to. Not your generation, not the tech generation. Tech generation views a friend as somebody that they're connected to on technology, on social media. So this transitions from this just normal conversation to this person inviting Walker to have a sexual encounter through the video portal of Instagram. So when you think about that, especially for us older people, that's really, think about that like a FaceTime, just like a Zoom call. And so convinces Walker to have this sexual encounter. Walker thinks he sees a pretty teenage girl. What Walker don't know is that pretty teenage girl is actually a Nigerian from the other side recording this episode with Walker. Now, something that I always like to say here is that if you just stop right there and you think about what Walker did, Walker went from exchanging Bible verses to having this sexual encounter. Something we all would say, that's sinful. That's a problem. Newsflash. What Walker was doing is something every man in this room has done. Just didn't get caught doing it, and it wasn't on video. May not have been with a girl, may have been alone. Every one of us have done something in our lives that if it was on video, it would have been the most damning piece of evidence you could imagine. And I know some of you are uncomfortable with me saying that. That's the point of this, is for us to be a little uncomfortable. Because if we're not uncomfortable, typically we don't change until we're uncomfortable. That's our nature. We like to be comfortable. That's who we are as humans. We like comfort. I can tell you, my comfort zone right now would be at home with my whole family there. I love y'all, but I'd rather be there. So what I want you to hear me say is that the point of saying that is that until we get serious about not just what this phone does, but what this world is out to do with us through our temptations, through our sin, through all the things that we are apt to engage in, until we get serious about that, we're not going to be able to address the real issues that we're dealing with. And that's where Walker found himself. He looked around and said, nobody's going to understand this. Nobody is going to accept me. Because right after that encounter, this person came right back to Walker and said, if you don't send me $1,000, I'm going to send this video to everybody. Everybody you know is going to see you in this way. And so especially adults, what I want you to think about, I don't care how old you are, how young you are, I want you to think about that time where you were in that situation, where you were in a very compromising, vulnerable situation. What if that was on video? And what if somebody was threatening to send that to the most important people around you? Threatening to send it to your pastor, to your coach, to your mom, to your dad, to your friend, to the girl in your class, to the boy in your class. That's where Walker's imagination went at that moment. So this conversation, and these people, I do want to reiterate, these people are professionals. They're not just some guy in a shady alley. These guys are sitting there for a 12-hour day looking for vulnerable people to exploit. And you cannot spot the difference. I can't spot the difference. So this goes from Walker doing something he shouldn't have been doing to now he's in the trap, and this person is as vicious as you can imagine about putting the pressure on Walker to send him the money. As a dad, I wish he'd have sent the money, because I could have seen him the next day and got him out of this. The law will tell you not to do that. I understand why, because they won't quit. It don't matter how much money you send them, they will not quit. But what I want you to hear me say is that Walker was in a spot at that point. He didn't know what to do. So this goes on. I do want to make the point, because I think this gets lost sometimes, is that this had not been going on for a week. It's not been going on for a few days. This happened in one night. Walker went to bed healthy, and we didn't see him the next morning. And I know somebody in here is thinking that's no way that's possible. But I'm telling you it is. We look back at Walker's messages for a year, Walker's conversations for a year. There was never one conversation that indicated Walker had any suicidal tendencies whatsoever. None. Until that night. So, this conversation goes to them badgering Walker. Walker telling him he don't have any money. This is not right. He tried everything he could to get out of it. Finally, the person says, okay, you won't send me the money, I'm going to start sending the videos out. So he starts sending screenshots to Walker showing that the videos are going out to people in his friend group, in his Instagram channel. He didn't know it, but they weren't sending the videos, and usually they don't. But Walker, as far as Walker knew, they were just sending him a screenshot of the message being sent, but the person was canceling the message before it was sent. But then they get to Walker's mom, and they said, Walker said, I'm going to kill myself. And they didn't say, no, don't do that. Wait till tomorrow. Give me the money, and I won't do it. Didn't say any of that. They said, go ahead, because you're already dead anyway. They told my son to kill himself. Now, I don't know about y'all, but as a dad, that's hard. Shortly thereafter, Walker went into my safe, which he was in and out of all the time, because we were outdoorsmen. Walker shot guns every day during hunt season. He got a handgun and went back up to his room and took his own life. And I say that very quickly because I don't want to really think about that gap in time. But there was a point there where Walker was having to consider, what do I do? And I don't believe it was that Walker didn't think he could come to me. I don't believe it was that the Walker thought that we would really reject him. I don't believe that Walker believed that. I believe Walker knew that those messages, he believed those messages had been sent and they couldn't be brought back. And kids, listen to me. When those messages are sent, they can't be brought back. They can't. We got to deal with it once they're sent. And I think Walker looked at that and said, I cannot contend with waking up tomorrow and my mama seeing me that way. So that's what happened to Walker. Um, it's a it's a story that, going back to what I said to begin with, what are the odds? I don't know what the odds are, but I know that it shouldn't be Walker. I know it shouldn't be me up here in front of you. But here we are. And so my goal is to, in my mind, the way that we resist this evil, the way that we come back from this, is to spread as much of the gospel, because I would not be here without the love of Christ. Number one. Number two, give parents and kids as much information and do as much out there in the community, whether it's through legislation or other things, we're going to talk about those things, to make sure that our kids are safe. And so I want to show you guys, as kids, if you were at school today, you saw this hog trap example. I want parents to see what we talked about. So if you'll go to the hog trap video. So the point of the hog trap, this hog trap is, so we own land and we've got hogs and we have to control them. But the point of the hog trap is really to draw the analogy from where Walker found himself that night in a trap to how this trap functions. And the point of this is to help the kids help us all start to understand what happens. And you can hear, and then when I'll ask like, what do you think? What do you think? How would you classify what those hogs just did when that trap got dropped? They panicked, right? They knew there was no way out, and so they panicked. And I've seen this 100 times now with kids. That's what happens, is we panic because we don't understand there's a way out. Walker didn't understand there was a way out. And so what we talk about is that with that trap elevated, it addresses the blind spot. So there's a blind spot for all of us. Boys and girls, we have a blind spot, and they're different. Two different, we function differently. Men and women, we're different. And I tell the kids, I say, you know what? We're all here because our mom and daddy had sex. I said it. We're all here, every one of us. Kid, your mom and daddy had sex. That's how you got here. Parents, all right, we're getting real quiet. We're talking about sex in a Baptist church. I want you to understand, if we don't start having these conversations, folks, it's going to lead us to places we don't need to go, because this is a function of life. And so the reality is, boys, we have a blind spot. Men, we have a blind spot in that we're physically attracted to sex. And that's a good thing. That's what builds families, which makes us competitive. It makes us who we are. God intended that. That was an intention of God. But it can lead us to a place of vulnerability and exploitation. And the girls have a blind spot. Their blind spot is the need for emotional attraction, emotional attachment, attention. It's great until you start wearing things you shouldn't wear, until you start showing things you shouldn't show for that attention. It's a blind spot. Both of those are great. That's what leads us to strong marital relationships. My question is, if Walker would have known that this is something that, if I'd have had the conversation with him as directly as I'm having it with you, if Walker would have known, hey, I've got something that creates a vulnerability for me, would it have kept him from stepping in the trap? I don't know. But I believe that once he was in the trap, he'd have recognized. My daddy told me that. My school teacher told me that. There is a way out. The second thing I talk about with the hog trap is that it's baited. We're constantly being baited. Everything you see on this telephone, we go through social media, it's baiting you on your own personal preferences. Meaning that when you go through that feed on Instagram and you get to that pretty girl that should have on more clothes and you slow down, you know what Instagram says? He likes that. So you know what it does? It feeds you more of that. Not only does it feed you more of that, the bad guy on the other end, it feeds him your page. Why is that? Because it wants to connect people with common interest. It don't necessarily intentional say, I'm going to go out there and find a guy from Nigeria and connect it to Walker Montgomery. But they're manipulating this algorithm to be able to connect those two dots. It's baited. It's the same thing. Girls, it's the exact same thing for you. Depending on what you're looking at and what you're not looking at, it's providing you bait to stay on that system more. And then it's being monitored. That's what these people are doing. They are monitoring your activity. So with all that being said, relative to the hog trap, relative to Walker's story, where do we go from here? So what I consider our mission? Our mission personally in our family, and I hope we can disseminate this mission to other people, is to help other families recognize the dangers, help them understand where we're in dangerous situations, and at the same time create some structure in our culture to prevent this from happening. So there's three places from I say, where do we go from here? There's three areas of work that we're working on. The first one is government regulation. I'm going to go through these specifically here in just a minute. But government regulation would say, how do we regulate this industry so that it's safer? The second one is private sector security, meaning what can we do as individual families? What services can we subscribe to help keep us safe? And the third one is awareness, which is what we're doing here. Today is about awareness. It's about telling you, because awareness is really the only real defense we have right now. The government has left us out here high and dry. And so all we can do today is understand the dangers and make sure we're addressing them in our families. So when I go to legislative efforts, there's several things here that we have been working on. So when you think about legislation laws, one of the things that we've done and we continue to do is hope and pray that we create different systems so that law enforcement can catch the bad guys. At the end of the day, if people are running red lights, we need the law to catch them from running red lights and give them tickets and prevent that from happening. So what we did, one thing in Mississippi, is we passed Walker's Law. Walker's Law makes it a criminal act to commit sextortion. That's the name of what happened to Walker, sextortion. There was already criminal charges that can be filed in our current system, but it was not spelled out to be able to prosecute sextortion. Another area where we're working is Section 230. So Section 230, if you can think about it like in the federal legislation, it was created to protect AT&T from being sued. So let's say I call and I say, hey, I'm going to do this, this, and this if you don't give me money. They wanted to prevent whoever was harmed from being able to sue the service provider. Well, that law was written prior to social media. So today it doesn't matter what happens on Facebook. It doesn't matter what happens on Instagram. It doesn't matter what happens on TikTok. None of the social media companies have any liability. Makes no difference. They're protected under Section 230, this Communications Act, because it's viewed as communication. When now we know that it's not just communication. It's a tool being used. It's a defective product. It's a product that causes harmful effects, similar to what we learned about tobacco years ago. There's harmful side effects to the product. Section 230 completely eliminates all their liability. So we're working to modify that law. And then you get into regulatory laws. So some of the regulatory laws that we're working on, the main one that we've worked on here in Mississippi is the Walker Montgomery Protecting Children Online Act. So Walker's Law and the Walker Montgomery Protecting Children Online Act have both been passed in the Mississippi legislature and signed into law currently. This second law is intended to regulate tech and require them to have a duty of care. What's a duty of care? It simply tells Meta, which would be Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, it requires them to say, okay, there are certain areas of harmful effects we're going to prohibit from reaching minors. That seems pretty straightforward, right? that we would not want kids to encounter drug dealers when we can prevent it, and they can. We would not want minors to encounter child predators, child trafficking. There's a long list of things. We would just make common sense that we don't want our kids encountering that on these platforms. Last year, Tech spent $90 million lobbying against these laws. Why? You say, well, why would they do that? When you think about these tech companies, think about them. I think this is a point of conversation that we miss many times. I did. Is that how does Facebook make money? Because you don't pay to get on it. I don't pay to get on it. Think about it like a digital billboard. You put a billboard on a really high traffic road, it costs more money because it's getting a lot of exposure. It's the exact same thing with Facebook. You put an ad on Facebook, a company pays for an ad, the more traffic that ad gets, the more money Facebook makes. Okay? So what happens when they take 40% of their users, which are minors and youth, and start limiting the exposure to these things? They don't care where the activity comes from, whether it's legal or illegal. It doesn't make them any difference. They just want the engagement. So they're fighting us because they don't want to put rules and regulations in place that would protect our kids. Is this the only answer? No. We're not asking the government to do our job. We're asking the government to put reasonable regulations around an industry that has zero regulations, have no incentive to make a safe product. So the other one, which we passed that in Mississippi, the larger effort is the Kids Online Safety Act. So COSA has passed the Senate. It's a very similar bill to the Walker-Montgomery Protecting Children Online Act, but COSA is at a federal level. So it's passed the Senate at 91-3. Think about that. Is anything passed the Senate at 91-3 in the last 10 years? Nothing. But the House won't bring it up for a vote. So typically we think of Mike Johnson as a nice Christian man. But Mike Johnson won't bring this up for a vote because he's getting paid by Meta to put AI plants in Louisiana. Politics are tough. Politics is all about the money. And so we're working towards trying to get these guys on board and putting pressure. And the people that are going to put pressure are the people that are in these pews tonight. We've got a responsibility. We can't just turn a blind eye. We've got to engage our politicians to help protect our kids. So I've got a couple of videos here. So I made a trip to D.C. I've been in D.C. multiple times, but this is especially enlightening because what this was, I'm just going to give you kind of the background. The first video would be me at a press conference. The second, and I won't play the whole thing, but the second video is of Meta whistleblowers. So this man and lady were in research for Meta, for Facebook. And so they are whistleblowers telling Congress, you'll see I'm sitting right behind the guys talking in Congress, they're telling this committee about what Facebook knew and how they knew the dangers and how they knew all these things, but they would not do anything about it because of the cost to the company. So if you would play the first one.
I want to thank, my name is Brian Montgomery. I want to thank everybody's support for their support. I mean, it's been unbelievable. Just thank y'all. Thank everybody for being here. My name is Brian Montgomery. I'm a founding member of Parents for Safe Online Spaces. 3 years ago, I lost my son, Walker, when he was just 16 years old. Walker was a happy, active kid who loved the outdoors, football, and living on our farm. Although he had an Instagram account, he wasn't particularly active on it. Still, one evening that started like any other, he unknowingly became the victim of sextortion by an online predator posing as a teenage girl on Instagram. This criminal goaded him into a sexual exchange and then demanded $1,000 as ransom for his dignity. Walker repeatedly begged for mercy, but his tormentor would not relent. Only a few hours later, my son died by suicide. I want to be precise here. My son went to bed healthy, mentally, physically, and socially. Had not experienced any contact prior to that night, and we did not get to see him the next morning.
You can go to the next
Losing
video.
Walker has been unimaginable.
So this next video is of the Meta whistleblower and Josh Hawley asking them questions.
Children under the age of 13. Why is it so important to Meta? You both testified to this. Your declarations testify to it. Why is it so important to Meta? Go ahead, Ms. Evans.
Children drive product adoption in the household, and VR is a gaming device.
So they drive product adoption, which means what for Meta? Just cash it out for us.
That means the reason that families buy VR headsets is kids.
Which means more money for Meta.
Yes.
So this is about profits at the end of the day.
Yes.
Let's just be really clear. Meta's number one bottom line is money. It is profits bar nothing. That's it. And what you're testifying to is they will do anything, including exposing our children to the most vile sexual abuse if it means more profits for Meta. Have I got that right?
Yes. If I may.
Please.
When I was doing research to identify the harms that children were facing in VR, which I had to be sneaky about because legal wouldn't actually let me do it, I identified that Roblox, the app in VR, was being used by coordinated pedophile rings. They set up strip clubs and they pay children to strip, and that Robux can be converted into real money. So, and I flagged this to Meta. I said, under no circumstances should we host the app Roblox on their headset. You can now download it in their app store.
I'm going to turn this back over to the chairwoman because my time has expired. I just want to end by saying this. It is abundantly clear to me that it is time to allow parents and victims to sue this company. They have got to be able to get into court and to get in front of a jury and hold this company accountable. And that begins with Mark Zuckerberg. There has to be accountability. We need to open the courtroom doors and allow victims to have their day in court. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So this is the work we're
Padilla.
doing. We're constantly trying to find ways that, we can affect change from a legislative standpoint, from a litigation standpoint. But that's one issue. The second one that I want to talk about is the private sector. And kind of when I say that, I mean like things that are commercially available that as families we need to be investigating and working with. And that's number one is a content filter. There's a few of those out there. Covenant Eyes is a pretty good one. Bark is a pretty good one. There's several of them out there. But as a family, we need to have that on our kids' phones so we can help them navigate this issue. Something I say all the time is, would I not let my kid drive ever, and then all of a sudden they turn 16 and get a driver's license, and I want to pitch them the keys and say, get out on interstate? No. I'd get them on back roads, I'd get them on gravel roads, I'd get them on the farm. We'd go slow and easy in places that it was safe. I'd train them, I'd educate them on how to drive, go through driver's ed. We don't do any of that. We pitch them this device that has got more power than anything that we could have ever imagined, and just say, take off. And I want you guys to understand how dangerous that is. So there's reporting software, there's this idea around private sector crime fighting, where there's organizations that are starting to look and say, okay, we can investigate this secondary to the law enforcement. These are some things that are kind of just getting going. But the next big area is just, I've already mentioned it, but it's awareness. So kind of the first aspect of that is Walker's Mission. So that's what we are. We're Walker's Mission. We're always posting things on Facebook and Instagram, using their own tools against them to spread awareness about these problems. The second thing that we're working on currently is Collective Family app. So this is something that we just kind of started with a guy out of Florida, where we're trying to create an online training, safety training course that will funnel through employee benefits packages. So we're trying to find out what is the funnel? Where can we intersect with the most people to bring them education about these problems? And so the idea was brought up that, hey, what if we put this through corporations that are employing tens of thousands of people that have got a benefits package, which includes health insurance, which includes dental, includes retirement, all these different things that come as a benefits package to employees. What if we provide them with an app and some background training so that they can take that home to their kids and to their family? Because one thing, and I'm going to say this in this group, one thing that we're seeing is that the biggest rise of anything is elderly people falling victim to these types of schemes. It's happening every day. And so from an idea of trying to help our parents, our grandparents understand what's real and what's not real, because it all looks real. So that's where the collective family app comes in. So Next Talk is a group out of Texas that they have educational resources that they go to churches with. And one of the things, Mandy Majors runs that, and I've been on her podcast several times, but one of the things that we have made as an initiative is Walker's Promise. So today in school, I told the kids, I was going to tell parents that they need to do this, and so they're prepared. So when we go home and you say, I want to do this, kids, you gave me your word that you were going to say, okay. So Walker's Promise is that we commit to not allowing our kids to take phones into private places. No phones in the bedroom, no phones in bathrooms, no electronics overnight. And we say, well, my kid's already doing that. Well, let's start. Let's start talking about it. Let's start thinking about it. Let's start understanding, okay, what are we doing at home? Because I know this is what I feel confident in, that if that phone that night for Walker, if Walker's telephone would have been in my room at 10, 10:30, even 11, Walker would still be here. That's one thing that I know I could have done in my family. I did not do. And so I'm encouraging you as families to step into this. This is not easy stuff, y'all. It's uncomfortable and it's hard, especially when we've already established a pattern of doing these things. Number one, our kids need their sleep. I don't remember the statistic, but it's off the chart how sleep deprived our kids are. Because every time that phone buzzes at night, you know what's happening? We're looking at it. This is something that you can do at home that is very practical. So the last thing I'll kind of close with, for us, I go back to this concept of why us, why are we here? And I think this scripture really, for me, has been the baseline for how I navigate this in our home. It's 1 Peter 1, 6 through 7. It says, in this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So how is gold purified? By fire, right? That's how. Hard times. So my question is, as especially standing here in this church as believers, how do we expect our faith to be purified? It's going to go through hard times, doing difficult things. Joby Martin, a pastor out of Florida, he says, everybody wants to work out, but nobody wants to be sore. He's kind of a big muscle guy. If you work out, if you want to get better, you're going to be sore. It's going to be hard. And so what I'm talking about here is hard. It's been hard for us, but for you and your family at this point, it's going to be hard. But it will be worth it. I want you to understand the dangers, and I want you to step into it with courage. So I appreciate y'all's time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'll let you close us through whatever you want to do. If you want, parents, if you guys want to ask questions, I can either gather them at the end, or I can answer questions now, however you want to do it. Okay. Yeah, so any questions? Anybody have any questions? I'll send the presentation, and also if you'll go to the last slide. So these are like when we post stuff. These are the paid places we do it at, and then that top one is a reporting line. I know that's not what you're asking for, but I do want to make that point. Is that is a reporting line that goes straight to the government, and they have always got somebody on call that will receive that. I know several kids that have called that number that were in a situation like Walker, and somebody picked up and walked them through it. But I'll share the presentation. Yeah. Any other questions? No other questions? All right. Cheers.
Well, thank you, Brian, for that. And let me just say, before I close it out with prayer, anytime heavy topics like this are talked about, especially in and around suicide, sometimes that can bring trauma up. into your mind and into your heart, something you've gone through in the past. And sometimes it can bring thoughts up, maybe thoughts that you've struggled with in the past. And I want you to know two things. One, there is help and there's hope. Okay? There's help and there's hope. So for help, if you have a trusted Christian friend, a pastor, you students, a coach, a teacher, a student pastor, somebody that you can go to them. If those feelings of trauma rise up in your mind and heart, know that that's God's grace that is prompting you to go and talk to somebody. Okay? So that's my encouragement to you. And then, so there's help, but there's also hope. Okay? There's a God that can give peace that surpasses all understanding, a gospel that can give eternal life, and a Lord that walks with us, who entered into the human experience and who in every way was tempted just as we are, yet without sin. We have a compassionate high priest who came to us. There's help and there's hope. Okay? Let me pray for you. Father, thank you so much.